guys. Today I had the pleasure of sitting down with Chiara Bartoletti, the Chief Operating Officer for Eightstone Multi-Family Office here in Singapore. It was a real pleasure sitting down with Chiara to learn her journey growing up largely in Geneva as a trilingual speaker, her time in London, doing a master's at the London School of Economics and working before moving out here to Asia. As the Chief Operating Officer of a multi-family office with a real cornerstone presence, she shares their journey, how the partnership was formed, and what the road ahead looks like. It was an absolute pleasure, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation and discussion as much as I did. Cheers. Good morning.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. Yourself?
You look fantastic.
Thank you.
So when's this High Rocks event?
It's on Saturday.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Before you
yes.
fly off?
Yeah, before I fly.
Are you not worried that you're like cramming everything in and?
No, that's it's just life.
Yeah. Have you done one before?
No, it's my first time.
Really?
Yeah.
With a group of friends or?
So I'm doing it with a colleague.
Okay.
With our CFO.
Did you have to rope that person in?
She's always up for anything, so it was very easy to come. I just bought the tickets and I told her that's
Oh,
it.
yeah. So how does it work? You have to buy tickets to compete.
Yeah, you have to buy tickets to compete. But last year, another colleague did it, and he sort of like inspired us to try as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then tell us a little bit about like your training. What have you been doing?
So
You have been training, right?
I have been training for the past 3 months.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not a runner, and I had to like start running, which is awful. I hate it.
Yeah, it's hard.
It is hard. It's boring, and
And are you running like outside on the track or in, you know?
yeah, outside on the track, on the treadmill. Like I just did.
Treadmill's terrible. I find that more
But
tedious.
it's more to build up the lungs, you know, like the stamina, and
Yeah.
go into like higher zones.
Yeah.
Very professional sounding. Yeah.
But high rocks, the thing is, I've done an analysis of that against CrossFit.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably, you know, less abusive to your body.
Oh, it's very anyone can do it.
They
Like,
can, right?
Yeah. It's
So which
not
are the events
technical.
that you struggle with?
What events do I struggle?
Yeah, like-
Which stations?
Yeah, like when you're pulling the sandbags up or...
No, it's the it's called wall balls. So you're squatting and you're throwing a ball.
That's what I told you when I watched the World Championships.
Yeah.
There was an English guy that was winning,
Yeah.
and he was like 26 seconds ahead,
Yeah.
which doesn't sound like a lot,
No, it's
but it
huge.
was on that
Yeah.
right at the end that he lost,
Yeah.
right? And it's funny because I think it's purely about stamina.
It is, and it's just it's the most horrible station is at the very end. So yeah.
Yeah.
But I've done a few years ago. I've done Spartan,
Okay.
and I also trained a lot for that, and I just couldn't climb on the rope.
So,
I just missed that obstacle.
but what about your husband? He doesn't do it, or?
He did Spartan with me, but
Okay.
he's not doing high rocks.
But you know, the great thing is it's
Yeah.
also good for the kids to see. When they
Yeah.
see mummy doing it, right, it will inspire, and it's fun.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Now, look, tell us a little bit about your current role, what you're doing with Eightstone.
Yeah. So I'm the COO at Eightstone, and I'm basically doing everything except like investment and client relationships.
Yes.
But I'm also, you know, I'm a bit like your GP.
Yep.
So I'm supposed to know. I know about everything,
Everything.
but I'm not a specialist on anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, because you need to have like a general overview of how the company is, you know, of all the different departments, of the regulations, of the risk, of I don't know, marketing, HR. So it's very
Well, I think the COO role really took a new paradigm shift during
Yeah.
COVID, where everything changed and you had to start working from home,
Yeah.
BAU, the technology, right?
Yeah.
So that's like a new chapter in everyone's life at that point.
yeah. And for us, it was quite. So perhaps we can talk about how we came into existence.
Please, yeah.
So and then I come back to why it was COVID was like a big thing.
Yeah.
So initially, we're called Eightstone now, but initially there were two companies. One was called O'Clanner and one was called Eightstone. And O'Clanner was founded in 2009 and Eightstone in 2014. And then we met and we fell in love.
How did you guys meet?
It's funny, we met at, I'm not too sure because we met many times. So I think we met at some events of the Association of Independent Wealth Managers.
Okay.
But we were also using the same custodian bank. So perhaps we also met through an event with them. So and also just like personal relationships. So there were different instances where we kept meeting.
Yeah.
And
Well, the partnership between Evo and Cyril
Yeah.
is phenomenal. Because I sat
Yeah.
down with them a few times, but when we had dinner, we're having a few drinks, and they're almost finishing each other's sentences at times, right?
Yeah.
Great chemistry, which is really important. But
Yeah.
they're both very different.
They are very
with a
different.
lot of similarities,
Yes,
which
I
is
agree.
a great partnership. So how long before, when that happened, before you guys formed together?
I would say maybe we were in talks for like a year or so.
Okay.
Like because to do something like that, to merge, you have to have cultural fits. You have to have the same philosophy, the same sense of direction of where you want to go, and you're not compatible with anyone, right? Mm-hmm. And it's already super hard to integrate teams, but if from the start you can feel that the vibe is not there, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were in talks for a long time. We did a lot of due diligence on each other, getting to know each other, and then we merged in October 2019, and we got the MAS approval. We were all happy. We decided to move together. It does sound like a couple story, right?
No, it's a marriage.
Yeah.
That's
It is
exactly what a
marriage.
partnership is.
Yes. And then COVID hit, and that was in March. And
Mad.
It was mad because we didn't really know each other. We didn't really, we didn't go through all the integration of like systems and people and who does what. And obviously you have doubles when you merge. Like some roles are the same essentially, and you have to redesign every according to everyone's strength, right?
Yeah.
And we were still like also technology-wise a bit of dinosaurs in the sense that it was still like.
Did you have different
PCs.
platforms as well?
We had different platforms, but the
Okay.
way we were connecting, it was not like, we weren't ready for something like that.
Yeah.
When COVID hit, it was just it was bigger in Europe at the very beginning, and Singapore was a bit slower to react because there weren't many cases. And I'm originally from Italy.
Okay.
And in Italy it was a disaster. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, I do.
So
really bad.
yeah. And so I had this like anxiety knowing like, oh my God, like if it happens, if we have to work from home and things like that, if there is a lockdown, we don't have enough laptops, we don't have enough this and that. So we rushed and I went to Harvey Norman and I think I bought like 15 laptops in one go.
So instead of toilet paper, it was laptops.
Yeah.
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 And then we started, using Zoom, DocuSign, all these tools that before would have been like, oh, but why do we need it? Like, what's the point? Blah, 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 blah. So it sort of propulsed us into the reality we are, but I guess it's the same for everyone.
Yeah.
But for us, it was super easy because we're we don't have like...
Yeah, you're mobile, right?
We're not part of a big group or anything like that, so we can take quick decisions. So COVID was an accelerator for the integration.
So is this your current office, your current physical office?
No, it's not.
I wasn't. Because I love your current office.
Oh, thank you.
It's beautiful,
Yes.
really stunning.
No, that we moved into 2 years ago.
Okay.
And
Did you help design everything?
Yes.
It's got a woman's touch. It's got that finesse.
Actually, Cyril's wife,
Okay.
so our CEO Cyril,
Okay.
his wife, who's from South Africa,
Okay.
is an interior designer.
Okay. So
And
she gets a lot of credit for it.
Yeah, she did everything.
She did. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I worked with her, but it was her. But the concept of what we wanted was to have something very open, very flowy, no boundaries between when people get in and where people sit. And
It's got nice clean lines, very light.
It feels like you're at home.
Yeah.
That's the feeling, and
Yeah.
clean and a bit of Asian touch as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think the environment's very important. I remember when I first set up my business, we didn't have a window for about 3 years.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah, and it was like, do we really want to spend money to have an office with a window?
Yeah.
And once you've got that, you can't really look back.
Yeah.
Right, it's one of those things. And actually, I think it's important for the morale of the staff and what have you as well.
Yeah,
So that's why I think working from home, I don't know how people do it. I think the rate of divorce has gone up because of that during COVID. Do you know what I mean?
It's true.
It's crazy. So unpack it. Tell us about it. So you were born in Italy? And raised in Italy?
I've never lived in Italy. I was
Okay.
born in Luxembourg.
Okay. Tell us your journey, because I know it's a very interesting one.
Well, no, so the third generation of Italian outside of Italy.
Okay.
So my parents were born in Luxembourg already, and back then, I mean, still there are a lot of Italians in Luxembourg, but there was a huge Italian community. So my parents went to the same school, and they met when they were like 8 or something.
No way.
Yeah.
What a love affair. What a story.
No, they weren't together, but
No,
they've known each other.
But that's how that unusual is that?
Yeah.
When did they first date though? In high school?
No, I think they were 19. They were working both or something.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, why am I talking about this? They were born there, and they met there, but they are from like 10 kilometers apart in Italy, from the same like region, same like sort of almost same village, not the same village, but not far away.
Okay.
So we always spoke Italian at home, and I have like this strong sense of being Italian,
Yes.
even though I've never lived there.
Okay. It's in your DNA. It's in
I
your
don't know.
blood.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, it is, because I did a DNA test and I'm 94% Italian.
Really?
Yeah.
Those tests are fascinating, aren't they?
They are.
They really are.
Yeah. So to this day, I still speak Italian to my kids, and I try to cultivate this. But I have a French accent, as you can hear.
Yes.
Because I grew up in Geneva, in Switzerland. So I'm also Swiss.
Okay.
I became Swiss when I was 16.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I moved to London to study. And I lived in Brussels for 3 years, and then I moved back to London, and then I came here.
To do your master's, right?
Yeah.
LSE is a great university. That's where my wife did her first degree.
Okay.
She loved it there.
Yeah.
I didn't meet her there, though. So you did politics?
Yes, I did. I first studied international relations in Geneva, and then I did politics with.
What did you think you were going to do? Did you think you were going to go into that line?
Yeah, I thought I was going to do something very exciting, like being a war reporter or an ambassador or like a writer or something like super cool.
Yeah.
But it turns out that it's hard to do super exciting things because you end up bringing anxiety to the people who love you most.
Yeah. So that changed the course, is it?
Yeah, it changed the course. I thought initially, so I studied European politics.
Okay.
At LSE.
Where were you living? On campus or?
No, I was in South Kensington.
Okay.
And
did you enjoy your time there?
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun time.
You see, all the people I know, like my wife and you,
Yeah.
they had a great time in London because they lived in the best parts of London.
Yes.
I lived in a crappy part, so like, and it took an hour to commute in, kind of thing. But okay. And then after that, you got a job with
Burson Marsteller.
Yeah.
In Brussels.
Okay.
Because
how did that come about?
Because I studied European politics and I wanted to like work within like the European community. So I tried to, I wanted to work for the European Commission or like for a government or for an NGO or something like that.
Yeah.
So naturally I went to Brussels because that's where the whole like the lobbying community of the EU is, right?
Okay.
And half of my class also went there, so it was really a fun time.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And it's quite when you work in EU institutions or around them and their ecosystem, let's say, you have a completely different life than if you're a normal if you work for a normal Belgian company, because it's like a completely different. It's like an international community.
Yes.
That doesn't really mix with the locals because it's very like Washington wannabe.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting you wanted to do that. So then, what did you do for Marsteller?
So I was working for the EMEA headquarters.
Okay.
And so they had like offices in all over the place, all the countries you can imagine.
Yeah.
And I was coordinating the markets, and I was directly working for the COO and the CEO of the region.
Ah.
And then, a lot of things were business development, coordination, internal comms, things like that. And then we also had like when there were like cool projects, like big clients that were with a political angle, so more on the public affairs side, I was also involved in that. So it was a mix of, I would say, business management and lobbying. It was really interesting.
Okay.
Very long hours and very bad pay.
I've heard. So so you did that for 3 years.
Yes, and then I moved to London. And I worked for them again in London for like a year or so. Then I got married, and then I got pregnant.
Okay.
And my parents were living in Singapore back then. I'm the eldest of 4 children. And,
Okay.
and
What's the age gap between the 4 of you?
I have 16 years of difference with my sister.
Wow.
But I have...
Are you best friends?
I'm like a friend mother.
Okay.
So I know things, but I don't know everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's a big age gap, right?
It's a huge age gap. But with my other siblings, I have 3 years with one and 8 with the other.
So mum and dad said, look, why don't you come to Singapore?
They were sort of like...
Had you spent any time here before?
No, I only came once to visit for like a week. No, I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And I thought, I think as the eldest and as a woman, you always want to please and be a good daughter and like be close to, I don't know, you have this like syndrome of being responsible and like wanting to be close to your family and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So I just thought, I'm pregnant now. If I should resign and move to Singapore, and because if I don't do it now, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stay in London and have a baby.
And what was your husband doing?
He resigned as well.
Okay.
And he came to Singapore looking for a job while I was pregnant and still working.
Scary.
And it was 2012, 2013.
Okay.
Just after elections.
Yeah.
And we were quite young too. We were 27. So it was really hard to find a job. And almost my entire pregnancy, he was like struggling, couldn't find anything.
Oh no.
Yeah. So I came pregnant, 6 months pregnant, and obviously no one would hire me in that state. So my father was like, you know what, you should not stay home and do nothing. You should work for me. Mm-hmm. But then you actually have to work. It's not like
it's not playtime.
No, it's not playtime. So that's how I started, and that's how I changed industry.
Now, can you be honest? Yeah. Were you worried about working with dad?
Not really at the beginning, but I realized very quickly that I should have been.
I can't imagine. Actually, I don't know. Yeah. It's like I've got a 15-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
And we've been taught she wants to go into business.
Yeah.
And I've got no doubt. Like she wrote about a year ago all her goals, and she wants to become a millionaire by the time she's 32. And I said, sweetie, I think you're going to do that a lot earlier.
Yeah.
So yesterday we were talking about her setting up a custom T-shirt business.
Oh, wow.
And I said, I'll be your first client. Yeah. Let's do this. So like fast forward. So then why should you have been worried? Because it puts a lot of strain on the relationship, right?
Yes and no. I mean, you see aspects that you didn't see before.
Yeah.
And also you can be mildly annoyed by like, I don't know, like, oh, make me a coffee in front of everyone, like things like that, where you're like, I'm not your secretary, yeah. Or, oh, I can't do my shoelaces because my back hurts. Can you please help me?
Yeah. All those things.
But the good thing is when you work with your family or your partner, is that you can be super honest and you can say things the way they are instead of like trying to be diplomatic, not, like there are no filters. And also that the person is loyal.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah. So
yeah. It's an interesting one because when my wife's dad ran a shipping company and he passed away suddenly.
Yeah.
And my wife decided, to take over the business for 2.5 years. And we worked together for that 2.5 years.
Oh.
And it was, we weren't even married yet. And it was an interesting time. But so you really do run a true family office.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. Now so I was on O'Clanner's side when we merged.
Okay.
So it was very much family in the sense of, yes, I was working with my father. I was also working with my husband.
Yes.
Who joined us much later. But yeah, there were all these personal relationships. And when we merged with Eightstone, then obviously it changed because we have other partners, other dynamics. We have to put more governance into place into the things we do, how we do them. So I think it was really good. It was really good as well to do that transition.
Yeah.
And to have it done so smoothly as well. And again, I think COVID was an accelerator because when you're not face to face, somehow you can say things. I don't know why, but I guess it's human nature.
It's easier.
It's easier to say what doesn't work and to see what doesn't work, rather than if you go to the office every day and you see the persons, then you maybe it would take longer time to expose like potential problems and tensions. So it really ironed out everything.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys really made it work. Now, tell us a little bit about the business, because
Yeah.
I've specialized in private banking for the last 17 and a half years.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'd say in the last 5 years in particular, Singapore clearly has made a statement by saying, look, we want to set up an infrastructure for family offices.
Yeah.
And actually, just to share with you how I decided to go into private banking as a practice area, I needed a private banker, A, and B, when I met about 5 of them, I realized there aren't many good private bankers.
Yeah.
So I started doing a bit of research. And I realized Singapore and MAS were really throwing their hat into the ring, wanting to make Singapore a cornerstone, another Switzerland, if you like. But I think in the last few years, it's been groundbreaking. But you guys have been in the business actually much longer than 5 years.
Yeah.
So talk to us about like how you feel it is being in Singapore as a multifamily office.
So there are a lot of confusions about what it means, and there are a lot of confusions about, and I think it's a term that is being a bit abused. That's a French way of saying things. It doesn't work in English, right? Overused.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but both.
Faux amis.
Yeah. Okay. You're trilingual, right? Or more?
A bit more, but
Okay.
not the same level.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So multi-family office or external asset managers, basically the way they work is that the way we work is that first of all you have to be licensed, so you have to have a license for fund management, and it's the same license that you would have if you were a fund manager, just a pure simple fund or a hedge fund or whatever. You would have, everyone has the same license. So it's quite, there are a lot of constraints and there's a lot of things that you have to do and have in place. So, when I hear, EMs or MFOs are not regulated, it's like, it's not true. We have the same constraints as a bank would have, almost the same, or as I don't know, Aberdeen would have,
Yes.
So first of all, you have to be regulated. Then you are not a custodian, which means that the assets are with a bank.
Yes.
Right. So what you are essentially is that you're an asset allocator, and you're you're the trusted person that helps the client to. It's really a 360-degree thing. So because you're not tied to a bank or you're not tied to I don't know, an advisor or anything like that. So you can choose what's the best setup for your client, what's the best bank for your client, how to multi-banks perhaps, how to structure themselves, etc. And so the way it works, sorry, I'm a bit confusing. No, the way it works is that, so you sign, it's a three-party relationship.
Yes.
So the client opens an account with the bank, and there is an agreement between the client and the bank for the custody of the assets, and then he gives, or her, or she, or they, gives the power of attorney to the MFO to manage their assets, and then in turn the MFO has an agreement with the bank, like a working relationship agreement with the bank to be able to do all these transactions.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you feel, because I know one of the major considerations that bankers have is getting that power of attorney to be signed off. They're very worried that that's going to be difficult.
No, it's not difficult, because the power of attorney is not a power of attorney where you can transfer assets to buy things. It's limited to investments.
To the investments in the funds, right?
And then between the client and the MFO, there is a relationship, a mandate. That dictates the terms of how the assets are going to be managed.
Yes.
And you can breach them. If you breach them, you're in breach. You can be sued, and you can go to, you can have big problems. So it's very, very regulated. So there isn't, and I don't think there is any difference between having a LPO, a power of attorney with an MFO, or having a discretionary account with the bank. At the end of the day, it's the same thing.
You know what I find interesting is because now in private banking, the regulators are very comprehensive, and it's the private bank is consumed, I would say, at least 50% of the time with documentation and that whole process. What would it be like if I was a banker working with you now, in terms of hopefully it's a little bit less though, right?
It's less, Because we have people who help, but also because a lot of documentation are internal policies of the bank, which are not necessarily necessary.
I get you.
And also there's a lot of inflexibility. So I would say it in banks and for some aspects, you know, like...
Well, you guys, the one thing that struck me was that you're an absolute professional outfit. You know, you're a very international brand and presence, but your presence here in Singapore is legitimate, right? So you've got, how many staff do you have now?
21 in Singapore.
Okay, and you've got $2.5 billion under management?
Yeah, slightly more.
Okay,
yes.
Fantastic.
And we have people from very diverse backgrounds, actually.
Share with us the infrastructure, because this, to me, is what differentiates you from so many others.
So I think the difference between our structure and others is that we are very structured indeed. So we have an investment team that is doing investments, and then most of our investments are in discretionary. I would say 99% of our investments are managed in a discretionary manner. So it means that they are, that the investment team is tasked with following the mandates and having strategies, following the markets, placing the orders, etc.
Yes.
And then we have, and in that team, we have people with specialties. We are quite strong on the credit fixed income side.
Okay.
We also run our own funds in that space. So there's a lot of know-how and knowledge, and we have funds that have been going on for like 10 years.
And then for the rest of the infrastructure, do you have you've got a legal practitioner?
So so the investment team does investments. Then we have the middle office, which does all the reconciliation. And you wouldn't believe how complex it is because we have multiple custodians, so multiple banks to reconcile every day that send files in different formats and different things. So it's a nightmare. Yeah. And we also have funds, so we have private mandates and we have funds, so the whole thing makes it very, very complex. So that's why we also have a middle office department that works super hard.
Yeah.
We have a legal and compliance department, and then we have all the front office personnel, so family officers, which are essentially assistant relationship managers.
Okay.
And we have front office people and operations.
Wow.
So yeah, that's quite a lot of people.
And how does it work? Because I know, so for example, Ivo and Cyril will spend a lot of time in Europe.
Yes.
How does that work? Because do you have an office in Geneva?
We have an office in Geneva, but it's not.
It's like a rep office.
It's a rep office, and it's our sister company.
Okay.
It's not a licensed office. It's just that because we have quite a number of clients who are in Europe.
Yes.
So we needed to have like a space where we could sit and work from there if we want to. Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about the growth plan of the business. Like,
Yes.
what are you guys hoping to do in the next few years here in Singapore?
Well, it's a very ambitious one.
Yeah. I like the sound of that.
We've been around for, if we count the whole history collectively, we've been around since 2009. So that's quite a number of years, right?
Yes.
So in a way, we're very established, but at the same time, we have this adventurous spirit, and we want to grow. We have this startup energy, even though we're obviously not a startup.
You definitely have that startup energy, though.
Yeah,
for sure.
Even in, as you were mentioning before, even our office, how it looks like, it's not stuck up, it's not super corporate, it's not lots of things that are very common in this environment, in this business.
Yeah.
So what we want to achieve is to double our assets within the three next years.
Okay.
But obviously, it's very ambitious, but you have to be very ambitious to succeed. So in order to do that, there's several. You can grow organically, but growing organically is
it's difficult.
It's difficult. You're not selling bicycles. You're not selling, T-shirts.
Yeah.
You don't have you can't scale it. It's not a scalable model. It's a question of trust and personal relationships. So your network can grow, but how big can it grow? If you don't invest in it, right?
Yeah.
So in the past 2 years, we've been investing quite a lot in technology, automating, to be able to welcome more assets and more RMs. We've also been investing a lot in our brand, understanding who we are, because we had two different brands, so two different spirits.
Yes.
And we don't want to be tied to a person or an individual. We don't want to say, oh, this is Ivo's company, or this is Cyril's company, or this is, that's not what we want to do. We want to build a real brand that is there to last.
Yeah.
So it's bigger than a personality, which in this particular space is quite rare, because I find personally that most MFOs are linked to a person.
Yes.
And there is no brand concept.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can attract talent based on that, because what happens if the person retires or anything happens to the person? It's not sustainable. What we want to do is build a scalable model. So we have doing a lot of introspective work on who we are and how and where we want to go. Right?
Do you lead a lot of those conversations? Were you asking those tough questions?
Yeah. And we also hired like an external agency, a branding agency that did a study on. So it was quite interesting because they did interviews of us.
What, every member of staff, or
no, not
senior?
every, but they took from different departments, different levels, newcomers, people who were there for we have staff that was with us for 10 years or more.
Yeah.
And then they also spoke to clients, and they also spoke to banks we work with to understand how they perceived us.
So interesting.
Yeah. So they came up with this findings of who we are, and we're like, yeah, it doesn't surprise us.
Yeah.
This is who we are.
So you spent all that money and it wasn't a revelation.
No, it was not. That's called marketing.
Yeah, it is. It is. No, but it's good to. But because I met, I've known Cyril for many years, but we had lost contact. So when I met Ivo and Cyril, it was Eightstone.
Yeah.
Right. So I think someone coming new to meet with you.
Yeah.
I didn't see anything different, right? But what I found very interesting, because when I met with the CIO, Olivier, as well, all three of us, everyone had a voice, everyone has different ideas, but there clearly is a strategy.
Yeah.
There's a uniformed approach. So that's exciting.
And and the thing is, we're all very, very different.
Yeah.
But we all place family on top of everything. We have this human connection.
Yeah.
On values. That I think are also, it doesn't mean that you don't have it if you're from another country. It's a common denominator for everyone, and it's what makes this business so interesting.
Well, I think what I've learned about this business, your brand, your reputation is really cemented over many years. So I was introduced to your dad by a dear mutual friend of ours who's the CEO of a bank.
Yeah.
And literally within 5 minutes of talking to your dad, we were actually. When I met your dad, we shook hands. When we said goodbye, we gave each other a hug. Do you know what I mean?
That's the way he is.
Yeah.
He's a very warm person.
He is fantastic.
Yeah. And so is Cyril. He's also they're very different, but they're both very, they're very people's pleaser and people's persons.
Yeah.
I guess if you are.
Well, with Cyril, when I left that meeting, because Cyril joined maybe halfway through.
Yeah.
But I told him about my son. My son's a boxer, an amateur boxer. So he gave, one of your T-shirts, and I said, "Oh, fantastic!" And my son wore it. It fit him. It was brilliant. So, what's that next 3 to 5 years look like in terms of how you're planning to make that growth?
Sorry, I got lost into.
No.
Yeah. So yes, organically is going to be tough, which is why. How do you grow, right? So you can grow by acquiring talent, teams, or doing other acquisitions of other companies, or working with fantastic introducers. So these are all very hard to find and require
a lot of work.
A lot of work. But we've decided to, because we've built the foundations. Obviously, there's always things that need to be relooked at all the time. It's not it's done, we're never going to look at technology again. No, it's not. No. It's always moving,
Work
right?
in progress, yeah.
Work in progress, but the house is solid. Not just in terms of the setup, but also our strategies, how our approach to investments, our offering, all of this is very, very clear.
Yeah, very clear.
And now we're ready to integrate people.
May I ask, sorry to interrupt you. So with introducers, do you have formal agreements? Can you pay them referral fees, or is it just purely on a partnership basis?
It could be. It's very open. It really depends on the introducer, their story, why
Okay.
they want to work with us. Yes, it's very, very open.
Okay.
But we have formal agreements. Obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be able to
Yeah.
to work with someone.
Well, a lot of
Yeah.
a lot of banks don't do it, right? Or they claim to, and then it. But I think that's a great way for any banker, right, to build their network for
Yeah.
sure. It makes a lot of sense. So for example,
Yes.
what's the onboarding process like? So say
Onboarding
again,
for clients or onboarding
yeah,
for
a
person?
client. So if a banker joins,
Yeah.
right, and they start opening accounts, because this is the arduous part in private banking
Yeah.
now. You know, how lengthy is that process?
Okay. One thing is our process, and the other thing is the bank's process.
Yes.
So assuming that, and the thing is, banks are our partners. They're not. It's not because you're outside the bank that the bank is your enemy. You know.
Yeah.
It's a completely different job, and you're not taking away business from them. I mean, it could be perceived as such, but it's not. It's not the case, right? So one thing is the bank's due diligence, blah, blah, onboarding part, which if the client is already banked with the bank, it could be very, very fast, especially if we have already a relationship with that particular bank. Let's assume we do. Then on our end, the process is fairly fast because we don't have like 150 layers of committees and we don't type with one finger and our eyes closed, you know, we
Yeah.
get things done quite quickly.
Yeah.
So I would say like it's a question of, I don't know, like once we have the whole set that is completed and our compliance officer reviews the file, it's very, very fast. It's a question of days.
You know, it's interesting because when I met Cyril and Ivo,
Yeah.
I was trying to give them a map of the market. And I
Yeah.
said, look, the reality is that less than 10% of the bankers
Yeah.
in Asia, specifically in Singapore, may be relevant, and maybe only 5%. Because I think it takes a certain type of profile,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
character, personality, and also where the banker is in the life cycle
Yeah.
of their journey. Because I think if I was a banker today, in my mind, I would either set up on my own if I was big enough,
Yeah.
strong enough, and had that network, or unequivocally, I'd come and work with an outfit like yours
Yeah.
because you can be entrepreneurial, robust, dynamic, and I think that's a very, very attractive
Yeah.
package to look at. But then I think the banker has to have genuine confidence in the relationship that they have with their clients.
Yes.
But I think 10 years from now, if we were having the same conversation, it would be different. It would probably be 25% of the market. Because
Yeah.
I think the landscape is changing
It
that
is.
dramatically.
It is. I don't know if you've seen, I think it was last year, there was a whole like series on The Economist on how wealth management is where the luxury industry was like 20 years ago.
No, I didn't see it, but makes
It's-
perfect sense.
Yeah, it makes sense because like there are more and more millionaires, right? And it's not, and it has become a service that is a very everyone can do it, and but it's not done properly,
Yes.
right? So it's still like it's a market that is underserved, and I'm not talking about billionaires because they would do their own
Yeah.
thing, right? But
Yes.
like and I'm not talking about affluence, which is another category, but like people who are entrepreneurs and suddenly have like, I don't know, 5-10 millions, they're really being underserved in a lot of setups.
Yeah.
And that's your niche market, and I think there is a lot of
Is that? Do you have an ideal client profile?
yeah.
Have you got a rough idea of what that is, and you've defined it?
Yeah. I think anyone who has like a client that has less than 5 millions is a bit hard to manage, just because you have to have like a little bit of a sweet spot. So I think our ideal client will have between 10 and 20 and probably 10 invested with us.
Yes.
And he would probably be in his late 40s.
Yeah.
So he would have to like start thinking about.
Are you pitching me to
No.
open an account?
Ooh.
Okay.
No.
But
He would have to like start thinking about like diversification and legacy and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Well-
that's the ideal profile.
well, the interesting thing is,
Yeah.
again, what differentiates you guys is that your business is largely DPM focused.
Yes.
And I think for the big banks, not the boutique banks, I would say maybe 8 to 14% of their total AUM is housed in DPM.
Yeah.
And when I've analysed that, it's an interesting one because I think the banks definitely would like it to be more. But then the CEO has to really challenge the thought process of the bankers, and they've got to financially incentivize them to put the money into that. Because I'm always cognizant that some bankers are always thinking what's best for the client, what's best for the bank, but also what's best for them. Because if the money is tied into DPM and it's institutionalized, and if they want to move later on, is it very difficult to move those funds? Whereas in the boutique banks, especially the Swiss ones, DPM's a very heavy focus. So I think that's one of the interesting parts of your business.
Yeah. But you see, like I think it's a niche business and it's underserved, but also why? You have to look at why as well. It's because the way you produce revenue in a bank is not through DPM.
No.
Right? It's through loans, it's through corporate deals, it's through other things. So obviously there is more money to be made, but I think the balance is slowly shifting.
Yes.
So this is why this business model is particularly interesting, because it's still like at early infancy, especially in Singapore, I would say.
Yeah.
And the whole concept of why you should have such a service hasn't reached everyone's brain yet.
Yeah.
Even though it makes sense, right? But I think if you're a banker and you want to make the move, first of all, you have to know yourself. Are your clients your clients? Are they with you, or are they?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's something that I think it's very difficult for bankers to truly admit to themselves.
Yeah,
because,
for sure. Because it's an ego thing, right?
Yeah.
And if you're a good banker, it means you're a good hunter. If you're a good hunter, you would have like an individual type of personality, and you would need wins, and you would obviously.
Well, touching upon that,
Yeah.
I've met a lot of bankers, and it's not their fault. It depends on the environment or the organization
Yeah.
that they're in. But I always said, if you inherit a client, it's really a double-edged sword. And actually, if I was a banker, 9 times out of 10, I wouldn't want to take it, because if you inherit a client who's a small ticket client and you help build that profile, will you get credited with that relationship, or will they turn around and say, well, look, you inherited that account, and if you take over a very big book of business, of inherited business, you'll never be paid the same. It's not measured. So I actually think developing your own relationships is really key.
But it's not really the case in our company. Like if you are cultivating a relationship and making it grow, then we recognize that. It's not.
I think the thing is with your organization, what's different is, just to share with you something I'm really proud of. In the last 17 and a half years, just over 96% of the people we've ever placed are still working in the companies we place them in. It's a little bit because some of the banks have consolidated.
Yeah.
I think if someone joins you today, let's just say the banker's in their mid-40s or mid-50s, the reality is they're going to retire with you guys.
Yeah,
I think that the dynamic is very different, because if you're in a private bank, if you join a new private bank today, the likelihood is that the CEO that is in that role today may not be in that role 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And then everything changes. Yeah. Are you guys looking to hire independent bankers, or would you look to potentially hire like a small team, or are you open to ideas?
We're very open to ideas. It just has to make sense on all parties. So you have to have a fit with the team, because you don't want to create a bad atmosphere, obviously. And you would have to, I think, leave a bit your ego at the door sometimes.
There doesn't seem to be any egos really in the office, right? Everyone gets along really well.
No, there's none.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah.
And we really want to preserve that balance. No, yeah, we are open to any form of growth, as long as we don't lose who we are.
Yeah.
We don't want to become a platform. It's not the business model. It is a business model that is successful, but it's not the one that we want to go into. And we don't want to lose what we've built. So our identity, we don't want to lose that.
Will you look to potentially acquire another business if the opportunity comes up?
Yes, definitely.
That would be exciting.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about your brand now as you're looking to grow.
Yeah.
What are the key things you're looking to do? So, for example, apart from today's podcast and what have you, what are the key things you're looking to do to get the name of Eightstone, further into the market, even though you're very established already?
To get the name out.
Yeah.
Would be great to have more LinkedIn followers, which is not the case.
Takes time, right?
It does take time. No, but also like it takes time, and also like you have to have interesting content.
Yeah.
And for that, you need to get people involved in creating the content.
Well, I'll give an example. My team and I have largely been ninjas on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So we use it to identify people and attract people.
Yeah.
And my head of research did an analysis roughly based on my personal database, my network. I'm only connected to about a third of them on LinkedIn, and he asked me why.
Yeah.
And I said, well, sometimes I'm very cognizant that some candidates won't want to publicly acknowledge that they know me.
Yeah.
You know, been
yeah.
a prolific headhunter within the marketplace.
Yes.
So I've, for example, if I'm walking down Raffles Place and I see a banker and they're with their boss, they will pretend that they don't know me.
Yeah.
And that has actually, funny enough, back in the day, because there are a lot of attractive female private bankers. I've been, walking through Orchard Road with my wife, and there'll be a lady who's a private banker, and she'll look down, and my wife, who's that? I said, oh, that's just a candidate,
Good excuse.
But, yeah, it was a good excuse. Hopefully she's not listening to this. But okay, so I feel, look, one of the main reasons why I wanted to partner with you guys is I really believe in this story. And I think it'll be a very interesting next 3 years ahead.
Yeah.
And the way I see it is anyone that joins the business today, when they look in the rearview mirror 3 years from now, 5 years from now, they can really say they've been part of something.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. You're part of an adventure, that's for sure. But also, we did a lot of analysis, like, how do we compare to, like, if I'm a banker, why would I go somewhere when I could set up my own shop, right? And I did the numbers, I did the projections, and actually it doesn't really make sense you end up having the same compensation or maybe less, and that's assuming you're the only shareholder. But at the same time, you're responsible for everything. Like, because it's your business, you have so many headaches. And it's not the same job, And the thing is, I think in the world in general, people get to management positions by promotions, but management is a real job.
Yeah.
So you don't understand when you set up your own shop that you might actually end up doing things that you hate, and that don't allow you to be with your clients and do the things that you're good at. So that's one consideration.
I learned that, when I became an entrepreneur. Everything changes, and I always use this analogy because as a private banker, you're effectively being paid to manage that client's money and protect them and what have you. But the reality is you have to go and sell to build a client base.
Yes.
But if you set up your own business, there's so much more.
Yeah.
Right. So the actual part of the job that you're getting paid for, which is to manage the money, now comes all the way down here in terms of what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
But I've done the numbers as well. I crunched the numbers, and I think it's actually potentially extremely lucrative. And I believe, because when I spoke to Cyril and Ivo, it's clear you have lifetime clients and beyond the next generation. So I think that's key. The other thing is when I look at where bankers are in their life cycle. So, for example, in a lot of banks now, I'll give you a quick overview. If you have $1 billion under management, typically you'll have $5 to $7.5 million in revenue. Mm-hmm. You won't be running at 100 basis points. Why? A few reasons. Number one, if you have a $100 million ticket client, they're going to push pricing right down. Yeah. Some of that money will be in custodian assets and what have you. So in the mid to big banks, that person's typically earning 7 to 10% against revenue, right? Base and bonus. If you've got a bank with 500 mil, that person's probably got $3.5 to $5 million in revenue, and they may be earning 12.5%, and so on and so forth. So when I've done the numbers, I realize actually there's a tipping point in the bank where you realize I can't earn much more.
No, yeah.
And the other thing that I completely disagree with, where there's a conflict of interest, in quite a few banks, they're paid on delta.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. I've moved some very senior bankers in some great organizations because I'll give you an example. I moved a lady who's in her mid-50s. She had a $750 million book running routinely at $7.5 million, 100 basis points. So world-class banker. And the next year she was asked to bring an extra $150 million in net new assets. And if she didn't do that, it would massively impact her bonus. But I think there's a point of diminishing return because potentially she could do that. How could she do that? Either squeeze her current clients or go and spend more time to generate new business with new clients, which will impact her current And as a result, I just said it doesn't make sense, right? And actually, you do that, you're not going to get paid anymore. So they're trying to squeeze so much juice out of the lemon, so that's where I feel here. It's almost the other way around, right? And you're almost running your own business under the umbrella of a business with the infrastructure because it's entrepreneurial.
It is.
What about market geographies? Because in theory, again, so in a large organization, I always feel there are too many restrictions, right? So, for example, if you cover Singapore, you may not be allowed to cover Singapore, Indonesia, and Thailand.
No, we have no restrictions.
Yeah.
So you can cover anything.
Yeah.
Perhaps you can cover North Korea and Iran, but other than that, and Russia. But no, we have no restrictions whatsoever.
That's
and
good.
There are cross-border rules that apply to any financial institution, but they're not, like reverse solicitation or things like that. It's not like, you can like go to a country and actively market something.
Yeah.
If you're not registered, but that's different than covering clients which are in different spaces.
Well, I think the other thing is if a banker was to join you, they can bring Cyril, they can bring Ivo or Olivia to those meetings, and in very large banks, it's very difficult to get the top people to come across, right?
And another thing that is very special about us is that one of our chairman is also one of our biggest clients. So we are invested into the client experience just because
you have to be, right?
We have to be because we're clients ourselves. You see, so you have this notion of conflict of interest. I think it's super interesting. Alignment of interest.
Well, that means you've really got skin in the game.
We do, definitely,
Yeah, and that changes everything.
It does. It's funny because I was thinking about how there's this notion of it's called enlightened self-interest.
Okay. I've not heard of it. Go on. Enlighten me.
No. Do you remember from your university days? You remember Adam Smith?
Yes.
So he came up with that notion, which is sort of the basis of capitalism in a way.
Okay.
That says that you do, like the baker does, the best bread he can possibly make, not because he's like kind-hearted, but because he wants to have returning customers, right?
Yes.
So he provides the best service possible to have recurring business. And that's the basis of why the market should work, because you're supposed to do good for your self-interest, but ultimately it benefits everyone, right? And I think this is businesses that are either family-owned or privately owned or smaller, they have this interest of self-survival because if they don't do well, then they close shop, right?
Yeah.
So, whereas big groups, big banks, they sort of lost this like responsibility and ownership and like trying to do the best because there's something else, because there are other interests which don't make you make the best bread that you possibly can, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's like a fundamental difference, and why it's so interesting to work for an entrepreneurial setup.
Well, the other thing is when I sat down with the three gentlemen, we spent a lot of time going back and forth, refining what the compensation plan and the model will be. Because I do feel that some organizations, it's like they'll sit in a room for 10 minutes and say, this is what we're going to do. And I think that's very dangerous, because when you really analyze how you're going to pay people, you've got to think at what point you're going to break even. At what point is it profitable? Is it sustainable? What happens if you hire more people?
Yes.
Because a lot of organizations will have 5 people on 5 different plans.
Yes.
They all go for a beer at the end of the week, and it's like, how much are you getting paid? And there's disharmony in the business.
But also, it's not just how much you're getting paid. Is for every account that you bring, every new relationship, every new person that you bring, you're actually creating work as well.
Yes.
So you're creating work for everyone. So you're creating more costs. So you can just like assume, I'll have like 80% of the revenue because it's my revenue, right?
Yeah.
No, it's not, because your revenue is enabled by the fact that you have all the support people around you.
It's a very salient point. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where all the calculations and the projections that we did came from as well.
Yeah.
You need to know what it costs you to generate something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is, I mean, you're completely used to this because you work in it, but
Yeah.
the turnaround time of speaking with you guys
Yeah.
is instant, right?
Yes.
In a lot of organizations, it's,
No, yeah, because there are politics involved and hierarchy,
Yeah.
and we're quite flat in that sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's brilliant. Now, talk to me about, like, I'm very interested in your career journey because I'll tell you why. I've placed, I've had the privilege of placing quite a few COOs.
Yes.
I'd say half of them were already COOs, but because I've worked with a lot of organizations that were rolling out, the other half I helped transition to become COOs.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is when I initially spoke to those candidates, they didn't necessarily see it, and the clients didn't necessarily see it. And I always think, again, depends on the life cycle of the organization and the individual, but quite often if you take someone who's stepping up into a role, right, will take on new responsibilities and is eager and hungry to learn,
Yeah.
I would take that any day over someone that's already doing it and then it's just moving for a little bit more money,
Yeah.
right? Because it's flat. But how was the genesis for you to become the COO? And how did you learn to take on those things? And what are you doing as you progress and help build the business?
So even though I went to work for my father, nothing was given to me.
Yeah. There's no way.
There's no way. And at the beginning, so I had more of a public affairs and internal comms, external comms sort of background, right? And I did do a lot of coordination, and I think I'm an analytical person. I like to solve things, and I like to see the big picture.
Yeah.
And I hate to do the same thing every day. I hate routine, and I hate like.
How does that work with high rocks though? Isn't it the same thing?
Oh, that's different because it's a new challenge.
Okay, true.
I
You'll drop it after and move on to the next
most
thing.
probably.
Yeah, I get you.
So I had to learn everything, and no one was like there to like tell me, oh, it should be done. I didn't really have a manager. I did, but no one was, because we were small.
Yeah.
No one was hand holding me, right?
Yeah.
So I had to like.
You're thrown into the deep end.
Yeah, and I had to fight for everything.
Yeah.
And it took a while, and no one, because people always assume that. People assume that if you're good and you do well your job, good things are going to come to you. But the reality is, if you don't voice things and if you don't show that, or just take initiatives and do extra things that no one is asking you to do, no one is going to see that side of you, and you're never going to progress. So I think I build my own nest.
Well,
Yeah.
I've seen firsthand with my wife, right, with her dad, because he was a business owner, entrepreneur, bigger than this room, his personality.
Yeah.
And it's difficult. How do you go from being perceived as daddy's little girl to a business professional? But having met you and knowing Ivo, I can see that probably happen quite easily, because you're a tough cook. I think you need to be, right? What about though?
I'm a very soft cookie.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, I'll ask your husband. When I look at the different types of COOs, I feel there's a big difference in that there are some that are very operational.
Yes.
Maybe because that's what the CEO requires of that organization.
Yeah.
But the COOs that I'm most inspired by are very commercial. They're out there growing, driving the business. They support the business. That's you. What do you sit down? When you sit down and you look at the business today, you say, right, guys, this is how I'm going to help grow the business, technology transformation. Tell me about that.
Well, there are a lot of inefficiencies especially in, I think, private banking, wealth management space, because it's a very people industry still. Like the example I was giving you before about the fact that we have, we have 8 or 10 custodian banks we work with right now, and they all send their files in different formats. And there is no common denominator. So it takes a lot of time to like manually input or change things, right? So one of the things is that you need to automate all of this. And up until like 2 years ago, this all automation required some talent, which is not my talent at all. Like, working with macros and like, I'm not good at that at all.
Me neither, yeah.
Catastrophic, indeed. But with AI, anyone can code. And we've started like coding things that just for stupid things, you know, like just like, I don't know, like you have an Excel and you were perhaps before like you had to open it.
Equals sum.
Yeah. And now you can just like run the program and just open the file and everything is in there.
Yeah.
So all these things, like little inefficiencies, they add up, you know? And then also sometimes, and then it takes resources and time and it just makes the whole thing very heavy, right? And also sometimes people are doing things because someone told them to do it, but then no one relooks at the process and actually these things have become useless.
Yeah.
And no one bothers to do an internal audit to relook at why you're doing the things you're doing.
Yeah.
So we're constantly like, honestly, every 6 months, I have to relook at why are we doing the things we're doing the way we're doing them.
Yeah.
Because perhaps they used to make sense, but they don't make any more sense. So that's one big aspect of my job is to relook at things.
Yeah.
And to look at how we are positioning ourselves and what's out there and like, you know, because we have funds, we have structures in Luxembourg, we have structures in the Cayman, we have VCC structures, we have lots of different type of legal structures that require you to be on top of that as well and know what's the latest outcome on this or that.
Yeah. But it's so interesting though, right?
Yeah.
It's the thing about AI that I find it's scary for most of us, right? Because
it's not.
You know, for me it is. I look at it, I think because you always worry, like, are we going to become redundant at what point? But the one thing that I still feel, I feel AI is high on IQ but low on EQ.
Yes.
I'll give an example. So I asked a few clients to write some testimonials recently, and they don't know each other, and they said, I've written this one. And then, I don't know why, they all sent me one back. Oh, I put this through ChatGPT, and this is what they wrote. Which one do you prefer? And I got my wife to read both versions.
And she knew which.
Well, she didn't. Well, she said this one, and it was always the authentic one.
Well,
right?
I disagree with that, though.
Why?
Because it means you don't know how to prompt.
Could be.
Yeah.
But it's not me.
Not you.
It's
I mean, you
guys,
in
by
the
way.
generic term, not
But
you.
really, so tell me, how would you do it then?
So you would have to, let's say, you want to write a. You have to say, okay, let's say you want to write a market commentary, okay?
Okay.
You should say things like, oh, I'm a top CIO of a very big organization. I am a warm person, yet I'm professional. I'm this, I'm that. You have to give a description of who you are.
Wow.
And you can say like, oh, speak in the voice of Gillian Tett, you know, like the FT journalist, let's say. And then the thing would sound like a real human, actually.
So hold on. So next time I screw up with my wife, which is probably tomorrow or something, I need to go to AI.
Yes.
And I say, look, I'm a very loving, adoring husband. I've screwed up.
Yes.
Please write me a love letter.
You have to give more details.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Tell me. I need to know this.
I don't know, like...
I'm taking notes.
I want her to know that I want her to think that I deeply regret. I'm like... I have a scar on my face, so you know, little details that will give details that will make it sound like you.
Really?
Yes, I use AI to write things every day, and I don't write anymore. I talk to it.
Yeah. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
So my wife at the moment, unfortunately, so she's a Fulbright scholar, right? So she's
bright.
She's bright. Well, I don't know. She married me, so maybe that's questionable. But she's got a PhD from Yale, and so she has to type a lot, right?
Yeah.
She's a professor. And unfortunately, she's got a spinal condition. She has to go for an operation soon.
Oh, no.
It's a bit scary. We've just found out. And but she does dictate, but she's so used to typing.
Yes.
And you have to... I guess it's like going from Microsoft to Mac. You've got to reprogram your mind.
You have to reprogram your mind, but what I do is that I speak to it, but I'm also scared that it goes to Russia or like somewhere weird and they would have all my thoughts. So I don't say everything, or I make it, I change details.
But what she shared with me was the process of, because sometimes people will type as they're thinking.
No, I'm like that too. I also type as I'm thinking, but what I do is that I talk to it first, then I copy the base, and then I type.
Wow.
But I also use it to question myself, like, what should I, like, this is what I wrote, or this is the issue. How would you go about it? Like,
fascinating.
Yeah.
Really?
So I use it for brainstorming, like as if I was talking to you, like bouncing ideas back and forward.
So interesting.
Yeah.
You're the first person I met that I know uses it that robustly.
We did a big AI training this last year
Really?
in the company. So we
What about your dad? Does he do it? I can't imagine he's doing it.
he says he's doing it.
I can't see that.
No, I think he
Really?
started. Yeah. Because we had this lady who was fantastic to come for a training in the company.
Yeah.
And she's really, really great. And then lots of people started like using it like daily. And we wanted to have like, this is one objective I have for this year, which I haven't realized yet, but we wanted to do like a quarterly AI learning day where like people who have learned something in their daily use for work would like share with the rest of the office, like doing like workshops, like focus groups, basically.
You know, the interesting thing is with your dad, it's almost impossible not to smile 90% of the time. When we had dinner, I was having a cigar and a couple of glasses of wine, and at the end of it, we were just talking, we were laughing. It was fantastic. Now, the other thing is we've both got 3 kids. And I know a lot of ladies that I work with struggle with that balance. There's a real challenge. How do you do it? Because your kids are still relatively young, right?
Yeah, I just don't take care of them.
That's
that's
the
the only way.
Sure. But how does it all work?
No, it works. Well, it works because we live in Singapore. Otherwise, it wouldn't work.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yes.
We can't take that for granted, right?
No, and you have to recognize the fantastic work that the helpers do in Singapore. In reality, they're part of the family, and without them, you wouldn't be able to do anything. And you also have to recognize the fact that there are school buses.
Yes.
And
You know the crazy thing is, like where I grew up in the UK, if you have, or this is when I was there, if you have a dishwasher, you're doing phenomenally well as a family.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's a luxury. So like, it's
even in Singapore though, you know, lots of people don't have dishwashers.
They don't. But the thing is, I remember going back to the UK for the first time without our helper. And everyone presumed she was my auntie or something, right? And it was almost like, how do you tell? No, she's a helper. She lives with us, and you know, because it's not common. It's not common.
No, and it can be perceived as modern slavery as well.
It could be. I mean, the ladies, they have such a tough life.
They do.
It's really, you know, and I really admire these ladies. Now, let's talk a little bit about the thing that interests me now. Is when you look at MFO, multi-family office, within Singapore, within the regulatory framework. How do you see things changing and evolving? Is it very rapid? You know, how are you informed about these changes, or how do you stay abreast of them?
So I'm part of the committee of the Association of Independent Wealth Managers, and I've been
for a while, right?
6 years.
Yeah. How do you even get involved in that? How do you get
because I think it's my lobbying background.
Skills.
Yeah. Because I noticed that. So this association was formed in 2011, and at the beginning there weren't a lot of members, but they've been so good in, first of all, gathering everyone and making this a real project, right? And they've been so good so that they have they managed to be recognized by MAS, and we now have regular interactions with MAS. So when I saw that this existed and that actually they were talking for the entire industry, I was like, I don't want anyone to speak without me having something to say, because maybe the direction it goes is not the direction I want it to go, you know, not me, like, but you know what I mean? Like, you have to have, you have to be in it to define where it goes.
You put your hand up and... Wow.
Yes.
Good for you.
So it does take time, but it's also interesting because then I get to know like the landscape, who's who, what are the trends, how are people, like who gets fined, who doesn't get fined. And we have closed door meetings with MAS as well, where they tell us like what they really think that they can't write. Like, oh, you should be careful. You're a high risk industry. Blah 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 blah. But they're super supportive. Every time we have like there is a new regulation, they would issue consultation papers, and they will always like ask the AIWM, what do you think? You know, we're a recognized party in the consultation process.
What's interesting is living in Singapore. I've lived here on and off since 2001, and it's easy to take it for granted. But then when you travel, and you have to do any paperwork abroad, you realize, you know, Singapore's super efficient.
It is very, very efficient.
It's on a different level.
Yes.
And then what about, so for example, if a banker joins you,
Yes.
getting licensed. So in a lot of banks, this takes quite a lot of time, but it's very efficient with
To
you.
become a registered rep?
Yeah.
It's very, so yes, it's very fast because they actually always are. Your rep number, you never lose it.
Yeah.
Unless you've done something illegal.
Naughty, yeah.
But you never, even if you leave Singapore and you come back,
It's your identity number, yeah.
exactly, it stays there forever, right? So it's just a notification process. So what MES wants is that you do the due diligence checks to make sure that the person is fit and proper, which you would do at the point of hiring anyways, right?
Yeah.
And then the notification just takes a couple of days.
You know what? This is so important because years ago,
Yeah.
this is going back to 2006, 2007, there was a banker that I came into contact with that had done some naughty things, got
Yeah.
into trouble, and I bumped into him about a year later, and he looked completely different. I didn't even recognize him, different name, everything, and he was trying to,
Pretend it was another person.
yeah. So now, seriously,
Really?
yeah.
That's
And
quite illegal.
So
though.
So what happened was he was getting interviewed by a bank, and I happen to know the head of HR very, very well.
Yeah.
And I said, look, you're on the verge of making this person an offer.
Yeah.
He goes, how do you know? I said, doesn't matter, I just know. But do you recall going back 2 years? It was this guy, and he was
That's
shocked
crazy.
because he'd actually met the guy before,
Yeah.
didn't recognize him. So these things are important.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Look, it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you want to cover or share?
No, not really.
You know,
Yeah, no.
the thing in meeting with you and the team
Yeah.
is it's just such a great setup, very professional, very family oriented. And I'm looking forward to the next few years ahead working with you.
So do I. So do we.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you
It's been
so
a pleasure.
much.
Cheers.
Thanks.